Like, I come in here, and Pastor West says, pull out your hymn book. I was like, what's a hymn book? Like, I'd never heard of that before. Open up to page 212. Praise God! And it was like that. And I was like, what in the world is this? This is not like church like I'd ever experienced before. And if I'm honest, like, the church that I grew up in, like, the average age was probably like 35 to 40. And when I looked at the church here, which is nothing wrong with that, at the time the average age seemed to be about like 60. And so it was like totally different to me. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it was just kind of like, it was like, whoa, this is a whole different ballgame. After church got over, I remember Pastor West kept talking about his dog his whole sermon. He had this little tiny dog, and he loved talking about him. He talked about his dog, and then we had an interview over in this room over here. And the elders were in there, and Pastor West. And if I'm honest with you, like, I felt like I just like did horrible during the interview. Like, I felt super awkward the whole time. And I wish Mike was here, but for like a year and a half, I was intimidated with Mike. I don't know why, but he was very intimidating to me during that interview. He was so intimidating. So I walked out of there thinking, man, I'm not coming back here. I'm not getting a job. I don't even know if I fit in here. And I got a call the next day, and Pastor West was like, hey, you got the job. I was like, oh, wow. And basically it was because no one else had applied, but I was happy to take it anyway. So he's like, hey, you get $100 a week. You come and you lead youth group in the morning and at night and on Sundays, and that's all your commitment. I was like, oh, that's awesome. That is great. So I started walking around. I started telling people who I knew that I had got this job. And there was one person in particular who I talked to. He was in a leadership role in a church. And he said, hey, Brett, this is a great opportunity for you. Like, this will be good practice. Because there'll be a point where you can move on to the next church a little bit bigger, and then another church which is a little bit bigger than that, and you can keep practicing and getting better and better and better. Since then, like, I've talked about this before, and I've processed it, and what I've said is, like, you don't practice on people, right? Like, you guys aren't practice people for me to be a pastor. Like, you guys are real people. And when I was a youth pastor, for that very short time, Austin was not a practice kid. And Ethan were not practice kids. And I 100% believe that. But if I'm honest with you, at the time, like, I kind of did feel that way a little bit when I got the job. Like, not that I was practicing, but like there would be a point where I would move on to a bigger church and then continue to move on to a bigger church and a bigger church until I'm some sort of mega church pastor. Now, that's not my heart now, but at the time, that's kind of where my heart was at. And the thing is when we talk about healthy churches, like the things that we point to, which we're going to talk about here in a second, are usually like church size and finances. However, God looks at church health much different than that. Like, a healthy church isn't necessarily a big church, and an unhealthy church isn't necessarily a small church.